Alrighty. So talking about alphabet soup. If you're like me, you look at all of these drugs and you're like, what in the world? You can't pronounce half of them. But just to kind of break it down a little bit. Endocrine therapy. So when we think about our endocrine system, think hormones, right? And that's where we think about estrogen and progesterone. And so we know we don't have any targets for progesterone, so we're just going to skip that one. So think about estrogen receptor. So if you have positive estrogen receptor cancer, then that means you have your cancer cell, right? Then you have these estrogen receptors on the outside. So that's kind of like a fuel for the cancer, so to say. So what we can do is we can say, okay, let's stop that fuel. So maybe it's just like a car. We can, kind of, if it runs out of gas, what's it going to do? It's going to sputter. So if you think about stopping the fuel for the cancer, hopefully we're going to stop it from growing, right? So there's all different kinds. So these are the SERMs, the SERDs, the SERANs, and the PROTACs. So if you look at the name, like SERMs, it's got an ER in the middle. SERDs, it's got an ER. SERANs, it's got an ER. So estrogen receptors kind of makes you think about it. So you've got your SERMs. So those are the selective estrogen receptor modulators. So that is, it competes with the estrogen receptor to block the growth of the cancer cell because you have that estrogen receptor on the surface. So it's a synthetic compound. You may have heard of like a common drug, tamoxifen. So if you were an early stage breast cancer patient, you were probably on tamoxifen. So there, and then also you have the aromatase inhibitors for postmenopausal. But there is some trials right now that is working with SERMs, and you can see it's the Elaine 3 phase 3 trial. I'm not gonna get into all the details, but that's something that they're looking at. Another class is the SERDs, and that's the selective estrogen receptor modulator. And wait a minute, did I say that right? The SERDs, selective estrogen receptor degraders or down regulators. So one of the common ones that you probably know about is Fluvestrant, Fosledex. And if you look at how it's spelled and you look at the suffix of it, it's strant, STRENT. All of those drugs listed there have that STRT at the end of it. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a clue of kind of what class of drug it is, and that's a SERD. So we have camizestrant. I can't even pronounce the giredestrant, which that kind of had some negative results in the trial, so we're kind of unclear if that's going to be an option for us. Imlunestrant. And that is, there's a trial for monotherapy or in connection combo with the CDK4/6 inhibitor. And then you have elacestrant, which was just FDA approved in January of 23. And that you probably know the brand name is Oncertu. And so there's trials to combo that with Piqray if you have the PIK3 mutation, or comboing it with a CDK4/6 inhibitor. You also have the SERANs class, which is a complete estrogen receptor antagonist. So that's a complete antagonist. If you think about estrogen, it has kind of like two pathways, and it gets real deep, A1 and AF2, AF1. It blocks both. So it's completely, it blocks it. So that is palazestrant. And so it's a SERD and a SERAN and a SERD as well too. So there's a clinical trial going on with that one now. So that may be some good results that we'll have later. And then you also have the PROTACs. And that doesn't have the ER in it because this is kind of like a hybrid, and it binds itself to specific protein targets. So like we could say, hey, let's target ER, which is the estrogen receptor. And that's what the PROTAC does. So there's a clinical trial right now. There's several of them that can do monotherapy or combo that with another drug. So those are things that we're kind of watching that may be some options for us down the road. Next slide, please. And then other drugs that are in development. So these are like, of the CDK4/6 inhibitors like Ibrance, which is palbociclib, Verzenio, abemaciclib, Kisqali, ribociclib. So if you notice, all of those end in LIB. So those are the CDK4/6 inhibitors. But we have some CDK7 inhibitors in clinical trials right now. We have CDK2 inhibitors and CDK4. So there's some trials right now going on with different targets. So that's something to watch that may be an option for us later on down the road. And then also you have the PIK3 inhibitors. I know that you've heard of Piqray. And so that's one of the drugs that we have. And then we also have another drug, which was just approved recently, TrueCap. I guess I'm saying it right, capivasertib. And so that was just approved recently. So those are two drugs that actually target that mutation. And I'll throw in right now that we have a new initiative going on called PIK3 Pathbreakers. And so it's a nonprofit that we're starting. Dr. Neil Vastin from Columbia University is really the brain behind it. And so what our mission is to help educate more people about the PIK3 mutation that is on the cancer cell, and then also to raise awareness about it, and also to raise funding for research, because we know that's a mutation that exists in hormone positive breast cancer. So if we can get more people involved in it and research to study it, that would give us more pharmaceutical options for later on down the road. So if you'd like to join us, we are PIK3 capathbreakers.org. We also have a private Facebook group. So if you have that mutation and you would like to join our mission, please join us. We are encouraging more people. We want to build our a group up, and we'll have different working groups so you can actually get involved with us in our mission. So those are some things that we're watching. There's all the clinical trials listed there. If you want to go look them up and research, you can. But just to give you, there's some hope. We do have some drugs that we're watching right now. Next slide, please. And then knowledge is power, right? The more we know, the more knowledge we have, the more power that we have, and the more that we can go to our oncologist, our care team, and say, hey, what about this drug? Is this an option for me? So there's a lot of things coming down the pipe. Like Amy B said earlier, when you have progression, get some testing done. Let's look at your cancer now. What's going on? If you haven't had next generation testing, get that done. Ask for it. Demand it from your care team. You need that. And you can always get a second opinion with another MBC expert or with a actual breast cancer oncologist if you're not seeing a breast cancer oncologist. If you're seeing a just general oncologist, you can actually see a specified breast oncologist. They're hopefully maybe a little bit more knowledgeable about breast because that's all they concentrate on. They don't have to look at all these other cancers. So definitely do that. And you can always consider a clinical trial. Some people think clinical trials are the last dish of fits or last try to get something done. That's not the case. Clinical trials are where we learn what's new and what's working for us. And that's not the last resort that you have as a clinical trial. So definitely we would encourage that. Thank you.
All right. So now
I just wanted to jump in, just real quick, just jump in and say that one of the reasons why it's really important to ask for this testing is that things change. And I thought at the very beginning of my diagnosis in 2017 that my receptor status was in stone, that I was always going to have, the cancer was always going to have estrogen receptors. That is not always the case. Things change. And some of these specific mutations that Melanie was talking about, like PIK3CA, is actually something that isn't in your DNA. The cancer can acquire that as an example of a somatic mutation. And so that's why it's important to get some of this testing, because as the cancer is attempting to beat the drugs, it's changing and it's mutating. And so that's why getting those genetic tests, those genomic tests are super important to find out when things change. So I just wanted to make sure that wrap that all up. Take it away.
So important. So important. Yeah, I just had my estrogen receptor downgraded from like 100% to like 12%, so it does change.